Switch presenters here. Actually, you did that for me, so let me pick my screen. All right.
Perfect.
Can you see my screen?
I can. A nice shirt.
Thank you. Yes. I'm rocking the brand new GSI shirt. It's preview for you here today on the call. You're going to see it at Collaborate next week, but I'm rocking it first. Hopefully the first time you saw it. Also, we've got the ask me about JDE DB. Don't ask me yet because I just got the shirt. I don't know what that means. But next week.
Everything as a service.
Everything is a service with JDE. That's right.
Yep.
So anyways, I like the shirt. This is it's pretty cool. But that's not what this webcast is about. It's about upgrading. So like they said, this is me. Oh, the arrow stuck me in the head. Sorry about that. We got to get rid of this this panel here. Okay. So we're going to tell you about lessons learned with JDE upgrades. You know, we've learned a lot about upgrades over the years, and if you're going through an upgrade right now, or you're about to go through an upgrade, you're going to love this webcast. But Oracle has said that there's not going to be any more upgrades after this, so this might be the last time we do this webcast, or any, you know, but after 2019, it could be all over. But, you know, so if you're running 9.2 or something before 9.2, and you're going to go to 9.2, which is where everybody wants to go, this is for you. If you're upgrading from some other release to 9.1, this is still going to be appropriate. A lot of these things we've learned over, you know, the last 15, 20 years that are still valid even today. So what are the major sources, at least for me? So I'm the one who did this webcast, so these are the things that I think are important. We have new features. People don't take it seriously. They don't know what's coming as far as problems. Making sure you have your technical certifications, meaning does your database support this or whatever. Third-party integrations, changes to the underlying technology, licensing traps, security mistakes, and my favorite, my personal favorite, database. Since I am the database manager, I do like talking about it. So let's go real quick into new features. One of the very interesting things about 9.2 and everything leading up to it is it's very different from previous releases in that you're drinking out of a fire hose. There's so much changing in such a little time. There are new features that people haven't even heard about, and they're on 9.2 right now. I did a 9.2.3 presentation at the Houston Regional User Group last week, and slides and slides and slides of new things. And here are some of them here. We got Orchestrator Studio, watch list panes, and the list just goes on and on and on. And these are all things from that webcast that I listed all of these features, and there's just not enough time to go through all of them. Just suffice it to say, there are a ton of new features. I'll go over a couple of them real quick. But you know, if you're running a web-based JDE right now, you've got the old version, I guess, quote unquote old, but then you move to 9.2, you've got a whole different look and feel and how everything is working. And when you get these new features, you think about, oh, well, I'm not going to use Orchestrator, I'm not going to use this or that or the other. You got to think about the look and feel of the application is going to be different, and your users are not going to know what to do. And if you drop this on them one day and they don't know how to use it, well, you got to know about that before you start the upgrade. You've got to be able to train them, at least get them to touch the application before you go forward. But there are some features that you can't opt out of. There's some fundamental changes to how JD Edwards works in 9.2, including they've got the My Work list. This is where all your message center information comes, orchestration, watch lists. You have notifications now that can be distributed all over the place, and you have to set them up specifically, and they all go into this message center. Here's one example of a message center with their inbox, and then you see up on the top left, there's a notification list. Here's a little bit prettier looking custom notification list. This is in the message center. It shows some really cool details. And these are actually subscriptions to certain notifications. So when you start using 9.2, not only are you getting a look and feel, but there are certain things about the application that fundamentally change. You got to build in some training time before you go live, and not the week before go live, before that. There's also object usage tracking. Now, this is not something the users are going to be too worried about. This is going to be something that, as administrators, now you're going to be able to see how all objects are used in the system, who used it last, what was it used for, how often is it used, and it's going to really help you fine-tune your system going forward. So for administrators, even for administrators, there's a lot that changed. A lot of new tools have come out. You have to be familiar. I guess you don't have to be familiar, but you don't want to be surprised when you get in your application and there's things missing or things different and stuff you've never even heard of before. So the new functionality coming out is just great. And if you want to catch that 9.2.3 webcast, Brooke can send you a link to that. It's on our list of webcasts. Here's a huge deal. Everybody says it's a project, but it's a serious project. You have to take JD Edwards projects seriously. A successful upgrade is you have to have a project plan, and it's got to be thought out and written out for everybody by somebody who knows what they're doing. It's not possible to have a successful upgrade without a plan that you develop before you start the upgrade. And the plan has to be managed by a professional who knows project management, who knows JD Edwards. You can't just leave it up to the CNC who did the installation. It can't be a functional person or a developer because they don't know the bigger picture. And I've seen a lot of projects, a lot of companies, they try to get somebody in there who it's like they think it might be like installing QuickBooks or something, and it's not. There's huge amounts of work that go into making the JD Edwards implementation be successful. And when you're in the throes of an upgrade, everything you're doing is really important. And this goes to the bullet point, consider it a production system. You have developers and you have functionals, CNCs and DBAs and other people in the company who are all working very hard, and they're trying to meet deadlines. So you're not going to go live someday. You're going to go live on June 1st. So everything's got to work towards that. And what I see as a big problem is they don't treat this upgrade as like a production system. Because if you have people who are expecting to get something done by a certain date and the system goes down on Friday, then you may not be able to wait till Monday morning to have that stuff be ready to go. You could have another consultant coming in for just 2 days, and that's all they have. You had to schedule them 3 weeks ago. They're going to come in, and the system's not ready. And it's going to take 3 or 4 hours to get it back up. So you just paid this consultant to be on site for 4 hours, and you don't have a system. So you really have to consider whoever's supporting your system, if you're doing it yourself or if you have a consulting company helping you out, make sure that you get a higher SLA on your upgrade system, because you will find times when things need to go forward and need to get promoted, and you don't have time to wait for it to not work. It's got to be working all the time. You just don't want to waste all that time. And also, I guess, speaking of wasting time, don't assume everyone is going to cooperate. If you break up with somebody, like you're dating somebody, you break up with them. If it's an amicable breakup, that's great. But are you ever going to get that iPad cord back from their apartment? Probably not. Are they going to give you the pair of socks you left over there? And if it's a long-term relationship, you may not get, the drawer that they gave you for your stuff. You might not get any of that back. And they might say they'll give it back, but they never do. And it's kind of the same. You have a relationship with your service provider who holds your data. If you're leaving them to go somewhere, like you're going from on-prem to the cloud, they may not want to help you. They may hold your data hostage. They may give you all these rules and deadlines and make it very difficult for you to get your data out of their system. And then even just not like taking care of tickets or, can you set up a connection between here and there? Can you give me an export of this? Okay, yeah, we'll get to it, on Monday. And you got to build that into your schedule. If you're going to move from somebody who doesn't want to help you, it's going to take a lot longer. And I see a lot of people don't build that into their upgrade, and that it causes a lot of overage. So try to figure out what your relationship is with your current provider if you're leaving them to upgrade, then and put that into your plan. Double the amount of time you have to do that part. Now, I mentioned moving from the on-prem to the cloud. If you're moving from maybe even just a data center or servers in your inside your company, you have to. There's a lot of extra work to move to the cloud. You're not just going to be turning on some servers there and copying it over. There's a lot of other. The cloud is just somebody else's computer, but it's a weird computer that doesn't work quite the way you think it does. And you have to open ports and provide storage, and there's limitations to all that. Then you have to have the bandwidth in order to get the data from your place to storage. And if you're working with a data center provider who doesn't want to help you, that makes it even more difficult. They may not want to create a connection. They may not let you come in with a drive, because Oracle and Amazon and all those cloud companies, they'll actually give you a physical drive to take to your data center. You upload it and then you FedEx it to them, and they'll upload it into the cloud. Some places just won't let you in. They just say, I'm sorry, you're not qualified to come in our data center, and they just make it difficult for you. But that aside, however you decide to get your data over, whatever that bandwidth is, if you're using, if you have a 40 gig pipe or you're using SneakerNet and you're just walking it over, make sure that's in your plan, because when you're doing a JDE upgrade, as some of you have been through upgrades before, you have to do multiple mock cutovers. And if you're depending on a complete copy of your data for each mock cutover, and it takes 24 hours just to get the data to the next step, that's going to be a big deal when it comes to time to go live. Can you afford to be down that long? And in this same section here, your retrofits got to be complete and promoted. And I know that makes sense, and you're like, duh, of course. We see a lot of people who are doing these retrofits, and they're not, I guess they're not testing the whole thing. Like they'll have their custom code, and they'll see the differences in 9.2. They'll jam in that few lines of code, and then send it up for testing. And they only test that one part, but they don't test the whole thing, and they don't realize that something else broke inside of there. Or maybe they have a custom application that's using something that's now deprecated. And that happened to me. I used to be a JDE developer a long time ago, and we were doing an upgrade from, I don't know, something to something. And we had a custom application that was using a JDE table that apparently wasn't being used for whatever we had licensed. And then we did the upgrade, and what we didn't realize is that table got deprecated. It was gone. So that one of the key parts of our custom program disappeared, and it took us a while to figure out what was going on. So to go back to getting everything just complete and promoted in general, there comes a time, when it's crunch time, it's just a couple weeks away, and you're like, you know what, let's just, we'll just put up this version there, or maybe we'll develop this and fix it later, maybe nobody use it. Don't do that. Build in the time to get all of your retrofits complete, all of them promoted and in production before you go live. Don't leave anything left to chance, anything untested, because it's just going to make things awful once you do actually go live. And speaking of things that make upgrades awful, is unknown known issues, unknown by you. So there's always known issues when you go into an upgrade. And if you are in the middle of an upgrade and you mess something up, or something gets messed up that somebody already knows about, it's kind of look bad on you. So don't embark on an upgrade without researching all the known issues. And that's not just looking at the current known issues document, which is obviously that's a good starting spot. It also means going through My Oracle Support, seeing what kind of tickets are out there for that release, read the blogs and forums to see what everybody else has run into. Even in MOS, they have the community section. Go read the community section, the community forums for Oracle, and see what they've run into, because you probably are going to run into that yourself. And I've said this to people, and they say, well, if something happens, I'll just Google it and I'll fix it right then. And you say that, but it's not that simple. Depending on what keywords you search on, the correct answer might never pop up. It might be some specific wording that you would have only seen in the known issues doc. And you'll just continue banging your head against the screen thinking you're a moron until someone else comes by and says, oh, hey, you know what, I saw this in the known issues. And then you feel bad for spending 2 or 3 days trying to research something that they've already figured out. And reading through all the known issues before you start may seem daunting, and may seem like you'll forget, but it'll stick in your mind, and you'll be reminded if you run into something that you can't figure out. You think, wait, I think I may have read that in the known issues. And plus, you can't discount the stress factor of having an issue and there's a deadline and people are yelling at you. Are you going to remember to Google the right words to get your to try to figure that out and open a ticket, and then you open the ticket and they say, oh well, we fixed this 6 months ago if you just apply the CSU. Just make sure you know all the known issues before you go in. Speaking of known issues, technical certifications, and this just means is your is what you're going to, is that going to be supported? Technical certifications in 9.2 and in the recent releases are pretty easy. You just go into the page. It's pretty simple. Get under these words here. You just put in your systems and your release, and it shows you everything that works. It looks like, yeah, so SQL Server 2016 or Windows 2016. I can use 2012. Perfect. The problem is, and the problem I've seen is people will see these technical certifications, or maybe they'll kind of gloss over them, or they'll look at this operating system one here and think it's also the database. You know, it just depends. You got to be really careful about these certifications, because if you don't get it right, then you may have one part of your system unsupported, and maybe not supported for very long. And I see in upgrades people who have systems, their existing systems, and maybe they're not going to buy the new license for it, or they're just going to upgrade in place. You got to make sure that whatever it is that you are going to go live with is actually supported. You know, nothing lasts forever. Here's an example of the database support. We see that, you know, if somebody's on 9.1, they can have SQL Server 2008 R2, but if they're going to go to 9.2, only SQL Server 20, they can only go to SQL 2014 or 2016. So they have to upgrade their database. You know, if they're on SQL, if they want to go to SQL 2016, then they have to go to 9.2.2. So that's, every one of these things are interconnected. And it's the same for WebLogic and all the other components too, is that they're only specified at certain releases. You know, you can't upgrade one thing without affecting everything else. Now here's an extreme, kind of an extreme example on the certifications down here is you see that this is 9.1.3, and it says here that the Oracle database is 11.203, 11.202, and the operating systems, and that's fine. And you may look at that and say, all right, I'm on 9.1.3, and then all of this is supported. But what this doesn't say is that these databases are not supported by the vendor. If you are on this release and have this database or have this WebLogic, you might not be getting security patches. And we actually had this happen to a client who was on a perfectly supported, technically supported setup, but their WebLogic was not being patched anymore. But they didn't look at the WebLogic certification. They looked at the Oracle JDE Edwards certification, and so they never saw it, and they ended up having some issues with some kind of ransomware or something. So keep an eye on your certifications. Make sure that especially if you're upgrading stuff in place, that stuff that you are using now can be used with a later release. We also have a very interesting issue that is actually getting more and more prevalent, is licensing traps. And you know, I hate saying anything bad about any particular vendor, but licensing traps, licensing divisions don't work. They don't work with the people who sell the software. So the salespeople are like, I'm going to sell you the software, but the person that you're not going to talk to is the licensing person. So you're going to get a contract that says, okay, you can have this and that and the other, but the person who does the licensing doesn't care what you have signed. They're going to come in and see these instances and say, all right, now you need to pay us, and it's going to be up to you to show them, hey, I got this with my license. So in JDE Edwards, like you see on the screen there, you get two databases, just two. You get Oracle Standard Edition for your business data, and that includes system, SY9, you know, SY920, SVM, and all that stuff, prod DTA, and also, you know, your non-prod. And then you get Oracle Enterprise Edition for your planner database. Now that sounds cool that you get Oracle Enterprise Edition, but it doesn't come with anything. It's just for your planner metadata. And the one thing that is also kind of a gotcha is you can't put third-party data on there. As soon as you put a third-party database like DSI or Vertex or something like that onto a JDE Edwards database, you now have to license the whole database all the way over. You don't get it for free anymore. Plus some other licensing traps. If you buy Enterprise Edition of a database, of Oracle database specifically, there are some things that are separately licensed. In fact, everything is separately licensed that are enabled by default. And if the Oracle or somebody comes in to audit your licensing and they see that you've got it running, you may not even know that it was running. But according to the data that they have collected from your system, it was running, and now you have to pay them all these back fees. So especially, and this is especially important in Oracle database, there's a lot of extra features that they don't prevent you from using, but they cost extra money. So if you're on standard edition and you're using the management and monitoring tools, the performance pack or anything like that, you're actually in a violation of license. You need to go turn that stuff off. Virtualization licenses is a big deal. So if you feel like you're going to go on AWS with an Oracle database, and you bring your own license, the cost to license Oracle on AWS is like twice the cost to do it on OCI. If you want to do Microsoft SQL Server on OCI, which I don't recommend, take that to Azure. There's different licensing for different cloud platforms, and I know I mentioned virtualization. I got into licensing on the cloud first, but that just because the Oracle price list says that it's this much per license, you got to look at the little fine print at the bottom that says it's this much per license on the Oracle Cloud or on-prem, but on AWS it's twice. It costs more than that. Now virtualization, like I said, does complicate things. There's a couple different schools of thought out there. Oracle licensing is not very clear on it, but I am of the school of thought that virtualization is allowed by Oracle licensing, and there's actually a white paper by VMware, which is the basis of my opinion on this. So if you choose VMware, there's a lot of people out there say it's not supported. If you use VMware, you have to license all the processors on that server. If you read that VMware white paper, it explains it a little bit better than I can. But basically, it says that there's really nothing in the contract that says that. You can still pick specific processors to use for your database, but don't take my word for it. I'm not an Oracle licensing person. If you get caught and they decide to charge you $100,000, please do not send me a bill, because I am not an Oracle licensing person. But I can make the argument that these things are licensable in a specific way. Now, when you're talking about licenses, they're really expensive. You want to be very careful about what features you use and what you're going to end up doing with them, because this is just a real quick screenshot from the Oracle's current licensing. This is their list prices. So you can see right up here that on a standard edition database license is $17,500 per processor. Now, if you're on Linux, it's two processors. Really, it's kind of complicated. But if you have a server with 4 processors, 17,500 times 4. But if you end up using some enterprise edition feature like the management and monitoring tools, well, they're going to upgrade you to the enterprise edition, which is $47,500 per processor, and then charge you for the extra cost of the management and monitoring tools, which is tens of thousands of dollars. So you don't want to make a mistake with your licensing. And I know I'm using Oracle as a specific example. I'm not trying to dog on them, but make sure you have your licensing down pat, because you don't want to be down 6 months after your go live and find out you owe somebody $350,000 for your license. It's all part of a good project plan. You got the project plan, you're not going to have these problems. Now, security mistakes. This is a huge, huge thing, and there's actually 2 parts to this. The first part is people taking security shortcuts during the upgrade. During an upgrade, it's common for installers and administrators to grant elevated permissions on the operating system, on the database, and even inside JD Edwards, just to get through the install process without a headache. And in some specific cases, you have to do that. There's really no other way around it. But you never want to move forward with the security open for any user. And it might seem like it's easier. It's just the upgrade. What's the problem? The problem is that even with an upgrade, you're still working with production data. You still have all that stuff there, and if you don't have the security in place, then you're not testing on your configuration that you're going to use when you go live. You don't want to be setting the security right before go live, and then on Monday morning, things are not working or not working correctly because you weren't testing that beforehand with the security, because you were using all of the, you gave DBA user to somebody. And another thing about after go live is that you don't want to find out is if you're in some kind of regulated industry where you have specific business requirements, you don't want to go live with wide open security. it's kind of embarrassing, and it could even be career limiting if they find that you've been running for 6 months and you have all of your data exposed to everybody. And later in the database section, I'll show you why most of you probably have all your data exposed right now. Now, a big change in 9.2 is the addition of data store security. So I mentioned database security, but then data store security is part of that. That's a tool inside JD Edwards that changes how security works on the database. I'll talk about this at the end of in the database part of the webcast. So I'm going to skip on to file system security. File system security also changes in 9.2. They're moving the files to the database. Now you have a choice. You can do it or not do it. I have a couple slides on how that stuff happens, moving things to the database. So I won't go too much into it right now. We'll get in a second. And I did mention regulatory requirements. If you have some kind of, if you're like working for the FAA or designing airplanes, or you have pharmaceuticals or things like that, you have really specific security requirements that you need to follow that will absolutely kill you during the upgrade, because if you don't have that stuff in place while you're doing it, then you don't know if it's going to be acceptable going forward. So you don't want to get any violations. Your stock price could drop because you are exposed, that you have your data out there. So you don't want that to happen. Get the security figured out and in place. And speaking of getting it in place, something I've seen is in older installations, when they're doing JDE security specifically, there's a few different ways to do security. Number one, you can have zero security. Everybody can run any application, do whatever they want. The next level of security is menu-based security, I call it, where you create a custom menu and you just remove all the menu items, all the UBEs, the sections, and whatever that you don't want people to access. Problem with that is that it only restricts you from the menu item. All the little form exits, row exits, and other buttons and hyperlinks and things, those are all still open. And people who have used JD Edwards know that you can navigate throughout the program anywhere, regardless of what you have on your menu. You can go from program to program to program using the row exits and form exits. So it's not really security; it's just kind of a surface security. The next level is to deny specific applications for somebody. Like, you don't want somebody to use OMW, so you just put a role in there for them and you say don't use OMW. And then maybe you don't want someone to use this other app, so don't use that. So you have all these don't do's. Problem is there's too much that you can't, there's so much in there you can't deny every little thing and be secure, because there are other applications that kind of do the same thing that they might have access to that you may not get. And then next thing you know, somebody's in an application messing with stuff, and now you've busted your regulatory requirements again. This is the time when you want to implement the deny all and grant back security, where you go into your JD security and you put in a public record that says no one can access anything, no one can run any program, no one can select, change, insert, update, delete. Put that in and then create rules to start granting that back. It's a pain. It's a pain in the butt to get that done, because you'll think you got everything, and then you realize, well, I didn't get that tab security, I didn't get that UDO security, I didn't catch all that stuff. But I guarantee you, at the end of your upgrade, your security will be so tight that it will pass just about any audit. You don't have anything leaking out. And another great thing is you start to discover what your users are doing. You discover what they think they should do. You find out that this whole group of users, because they had access to this application, they were doing this whole other thing you didn't know about. And when you get rid of all that, you expose all of those cheats and shortcuts that people were using to get around whatever security you had in place before. So I guess this isn't really a gotcha, kind of is, but definitely make your stuff more secure when you upgrade. It's a great time to do it. And now finally, my favorite topic, databases. Now, I was a CNC for 20 years. I still do CNC stuff. I do CNC presentations. I was a developer. I've done a lot of things, but now for the last few years, I've been pretty hardcore on the database side. And databases are quite overlooked in JD Edwards. And if you've seen any of my other webcasts, you know that this is a common theme for me. So databases, they're a thing. They're there. Everybody's got them. There's a lot of changes in 9.2 as it relates to the database, and the database stuff always trips up upgrades. There's always issues with upgrades related to the database. And being a DBA, it's near and dear to my heart. And as far as DBAs goes, you need to have a DBA, whether it's Oracle or SQL Server. Companies who don't take the database seriously always run into issues. And the first, it happens like, so you install its stuff, whoever's installs the database, and then about a month or two in, maybe right away, the developer's hitting the system, the testers are hitting, and all of a sudden the database freezes up and crashes, just completely crashes. So that takes time to figure out. And you realize that it was the archive log space ran out of space. Then you get more and more people on there, and then the database halts again, and you realize you don't have enough processes. The process parameter is too low. So you bump that up to 1,000 or whatever. And you just keep hitting these things over and over, and you have somebody in the background furiously Googling this stuff, trying to figure this out. So you got to have a DBA. You can't just point to somebody in the room and say, okay, you take care of the database. I mean, maybe you don't need a DBA forever. That's why we have managed services, because companies don't want to hire a whole DBA. They just need one for a couple hours a week. So we come in and do those 2 hours. So you may not need an entire DBA for all of the future, but you're going to need one for the upgrade, and you gotta have somebody on staff or somebody retained to take care of that stuff for you. If you don't have a DBA, and problems happen, then your users or your testers who are looking at the system and they see JD Edwards crash, they don't know this is a database. They don't care what that was. All they know is that JDE is crashing and JDE is terrible because it's not stable. So you want to set that up and get somebody blamed for JD Edwards is awful, and why did you pick this? When we're going to have a management shuffle and you're out because you've got this terrible software, when really your only problem was you just didn't set up the database right. There's another huge underlying change, which I touched on this earlier, is moving all the JDE objects to the database. You got to do this. I mean, some people are saying they don't want to move stuff to the database, but this is the future. This is part of positioning JD Edwards as a easy anyways, application as a service, putting things in the database, starting with the spec objects. This is putting your business functions, the views, and UBEs, table. Obviously, tables are in the database, but this is a one-time process to move all this stuff to the database. And the reason that this is an upgrade gotcha is when people are planning their data size or storage size, they aren't thinking about that 9.2 is now moving all this stuff to the database. So that you may have said, okay, I've got a terabyte of data, but you didn't take into consideration that you have all these business views and business functions and things to move to in there, so your data gets larger and larger. And then with the other feature of the object auditing, that takes up space in the database. And then you have media objects now stored in the database, all media objects in the database. If you've got just a terabyte alone, you have a file server that has all of your images and work orders and things like that all stored there. That's going to go in the database, and that has to have room in the database as well. And this is really cool. I mean, it may seem kind of weird. Oh my God, I'm moving all my stuff to the database. I don't know what to do about that. But the great thing is now it's all protected by the database. You have point-in-time recovery. You can go back to any moment that you have the backup files for, and you'll recover not just your data, but also the file system objects that were associated with those records. And this is a huge change, and a lot of people think, you know what, I'm not going to do this now. I'm going to wait till after the upgrade. But unfortunately, you really have to do it before you go live, because once you've gone live and you have a mix of media objects, the new media objects are going to be created in the database, and the old ones are going to be sitting out on the system. Another slightly more contentious move to the database is your print queue objects. So your CSVs and your PDFs are going to be on the database. This is obviously the preferred choice, because now all of these things are also protected by the database backups, by your disaster recovery and high availability. But third-party applications that depend on a CSV or PDF in the file system may not work so well with it. But the cool thing is that you can choose for it to go also to the file system. So if you're not ready to go to the file system or ready to go to the database, it's okay. You can also have these files go to the file system for your application to pick up. And it can be set by report too. So you're not going to have now double storage for everything. If you have one report that needs to go to a conversion program, then just have that one go and let your third-party software pick that up. So that was the big thing, moving stuff to the database. Don't forget the storage that you need for that. It's a big shock when you have set aside 2 or 3 terabytes for your storage and find out there's a whole other terabyte that you need now. And now that media objects are, they can be very, very large depending on what it is. You gotta make sure you have enough space for that. Now the next thing is this is becoming more of a big deal as people migrate off of iSeries. That is an exciting time, I got to tell you. All the iSeries migrations they're tough. It's hard to get everything converted in a smooth and efficient manner. It's not hard, it's just complicated. But when you migrate off of iSeries, you're going to notice a lot of differences. Obviously, the databases are completely different. It kind of relates to needing a DBA. But in the case of an iSeries migration, you really need somebody who knows iSeries and JDE Edwards and whatever your target database is. And most companies will find out right away after they migrate from iSeries, they find out performance can be a lot worse on the new database. And you may have bought the most amazing engineered system, a super cluster with tons of solid state storage, but it still runs super slow. And good people bang a lot of foreheads and a lot of desks trying to figure out why this is happening. And even experienced DBAs who are just DBAs and they're not application centric, they will try to reconfigure the database to address these symptoms. There's been some super convoluted setups that people have created to kind of recreate what the iSeries does in certain places just to address a specific subset of things that might be running slow. But even then the performance doesn't get fixed, and you're starting to wonder. I said get a DBA, but now I'm telling you DBA can't figure it out. And it really goes back to the kind of skill set you need. You need somebody who understands iSeries, JDE, and your database. So I'm using Oracle as an example because that's because we're an Oracle shop. So iSeries is really forgiving. It has these things called SQL packages, and I'm sure if you're on iSeries, you've heard of those. And you can kind of think of those as dynamic indexes that the iSeries creates on the fly to speed up individual reports, SQL statements, and so forth. Now, unless you're moving to an engineered system, which I'll talk about in a second, or maybe the Oracle Autonomous Database, which I know if you're on JDE, you're not. You're not going to see this kind of dynamic indexing behavior on Oracle or SQL Server. So what happens is on the iSeries, people who are developing their custom code, they may not be thinking about indexes or performance or anything like that. So they shoot it out to the they go ahead and promote it. It runs slow one time, but after that it runs really fast, and that's because iSeries went out and created a couple SQL packages to manage that report. So I mean, the concept of SQL packages isn't like only on iSeries. On Oracle 12c, they have adaptive query optimization. Exadata databases have storage indexes, but they're not seamless or foolproof. When you're going from the iSeries and you find the slowness for these specific applications, you probably have one of two problems. Either one, it wasn't developed to use indexes. Maybe it's using a lot of joins or not in conditions that slow things down. And also it could just be that you're just using too much data and the data changes too fast. So you might end up having to create indexes. You might have to rewrite the program to work correctly on the other database because the iSeries was doing some of the heavy lifting for you to make things work. Next thing is improper configuration. I know I talked about needing a DBA. Obviously, if you don't have a DBA, you may end up with an improper configuration. You just can't install a database and move on. I mentioned the archive log area filling up and running out of processes on the database. And this is on Oracle. You can't just run the installer. It's not going to know to set that stuff up. It also doesn't know that JD Edwards uses a different collation on the sorts. So if you don't set the collation correctly during the install, then you can't change that afterwards without a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth. And I can give you a list of configuration settings for either Oracle or SQL Server that you can take right now and set it up in this awesome best practices way. Of course, why would I do that? Because that's how I get paid, is telling you how to do this stuff. But let's say I did it anyway. I gave you that stuff, and your database is just singing from day one. Problem is that those initial configuration settings are kind of just a starting point. They may work for you forever, but every installation is different. You need to be able to tweak that stuff as you go on. Having some kind of ongoing support, some kind of ongoing DBA involvement keeps you from going down the road and having things slow down to where all of a sudden your nightly processing isn't ending till 9:30 in the morning when it used to end by 6:30. So having improper configuration is not just when you install it, but also as you move through time. This one is kind of funny in retrospect, I guess. Upgrading to the wrong database version. And this I mentioned in the technical certifications. If you look at the technical certification and it says you can go to 12.102, some people will say, oh, I guess, okay, let's go to 12C, and then that gets told to somebody else, and so now we're all going to 12C. And then you tell your DBA, install 12C on this database, on the server, and they install 12.201 instead of 12.102. Well, 12.102 is not supported, a certain version. So then, you're thinking, okay, well, it's just a dot level release or it's a whatever, and it's going to be fine. It's never fine, trust me, never. If you install SQL Server 2017 and think you're just going to roll back the compatibility level to SQL 2014, you're in for a big surprise. And the worst part is, you get this all upgraded and everybody goes live on it, and one of the most important things just stops working for some reason. You can't figure it out, and then you realize that you're too far ahead on versions. You cannot downgrade a database. It's just not possible. You have to install a whole new database instance, export all the data, and import it into the new instance. And that can take a long time. If you have 4 terabytes of data, for example, that's going to take 24 hours to export it and then import it into your new database. So be very sure that whatever version you go to is absolutely 100% supported. And we have had to help people roll back their databases when they've made mistakes like this. There's just no in-place downgrade. It's just not a thing. And now finally, this is the absolute biggest upgrade gotcha of all time, is data store security, which I mentioned before, and public grants for JD Edwards objects on the database. And if you have seen, I've done this webcast, a full webcast on this before. You can find this on the GSI website with lots of details about how this works, JDE DB security. The webcast I just did about a month ago was called 9.2 Upgrade Breaks Your Database. This is kind of a short version of that, but this really is the biggest problem that people have. So in 9.2, and before 9.2, JD Edwards granted full control to every JDE table to everybody that logs into the database. And they did this by granting this to a role called public. And this is the same on SQL Server or Oracle. This is not on iSeries. So SQL Server and Oracle have a role called public, and whatever you grant to that is good forever, forever and ever. You never, it never gets superseded. You can create a read-only user on that database, and it will still be able to write and read and delete everything from all the JDE tables. And that's just how JD Edwards works before 9.2. It's just automatic. So what happened in 9.2? They changed it to where that doesn't automatically create these grants. So during your platform pack, you have this screen here where it asks about these 2 roles. Some people installing it will just say, oh, okay, that's great, and click OK. And it'll create those roles. But what 9.2 installation doesn't do is it doesn't change the security. And if you're upgrading, all of the data, all of the permissions on the data that you had prior to 9.2 get brought forward to 9.2. So all those 4,000 tables that you have that all have full control granted to public, that all gets shifted to 9.2. So now you have a 9.2 installation with 90% of everything granted to everybody, and then the 10% of the tables that are new in 9.2, they have no security at all. So here's what it looks like on a client. This is come out of a software application called Toad. It's for Oracle databases, but you can see that they have assigned the DBA role to JDE, JDE does not need DBA. Nobody needs the DBA role except for DBA. They've got, even in the system privileges, they have a whole lot of stuff. And then look at all the tables that they have right here: insert, update, delete, references, debug, all that stuff. So they can go into these tables, delete whatever they want, change whatever they want, and you can't track that. And you look at the schema users like prod DTA, prod CTL, they also have all these extra permissions on top of them. So you've got layers and layers of extra permissions being put on because in 9.2, because they have some tables without security and some tables with. If you look at, and now talking specifically about the public grants, there's a script that I run that lists what tables have things assigned to the public role. Now this one shows PD 920 on the left there, and several other ones, but you see that 3,875 tables have permissions assigned to public for the user PD 920. How many tables are in PD 920? 3,000? No, there's not 3,800 tables in PD 920. The way JDE Edwards works is since it grants the public access to all these tables for everybody, a person can maneuver through every JDE schema and do whatever they want by default in pre 9.2. And if you upgraded and didn't shut this down, you still have it in 9.2. Then, so there's an application, P986117. Go there now on your installation if you're on 9.2 now. If it looks like this after you click Find, then data source security is not set up. Probably have all the public grants out there and things are not working. Probably also have DBA access granted to JDE, to all of your schema users, and to whoever's using the system. So you're wide open. Now what they should have done, obviously, read the manual. It says it right in there. It's not very clear. It's not a very good manual, but when is it ever? But it's in there and it talks about it. We talked about the platform pack role creation screen. This should be the big clue right here that something's different. And these two roles are created on the database, and there's where you assign all these permissions. But you also have to pull those permissions off of the public role. And there's actually a procedure for that called Oracle Public Shutdown. You can download that from Oracle. It was created like 15 years ago, so there's a lot of parts missing. I have an updated procedure for that. That includes all of the new things that have happened in the last 15 years, which has been a couple things. But really, in the end, you want to remove all of those permissions off of public, and you put it onto the JDE admin role. And then that role gets assigned to your users. And only that way can you create a read-only user or restrict access to people on the database. So if you go into your data source security application and you see this, or something like it, you'll see you're probably doing okay. But I did just do an analysis at a client recently where they had data source security set up perfectly, but they didn't do any of the Oracle Public Shutdown on their database. So they had this all correct, but on the back end, if you signed directly into the database, they still had full access to everything. No one had pulled that stuff off of the public role. And this kills you in an upgrade because now you have different permissions on different tables. Some don't have any, some do have some. If you go after the upgrade, you get an audit that says, oh my God, all your users, they can do anything, they can hide their tracks. And so you get rid of that stuff, then you've broken JDE Edwards. Nothing will work because of the different levels of security on all the users. And you may remove the stuff from public, but because other users have, DBA access, it still doesn't fix it. So what you should see on your database is your users are going to have just the roles that they were assigned: JDE admin, JDE user, and usually in upgrades you'll see that JDE_ role, which is the old pre 9.2 role. Your schema users look a lot better. They don't have a lot of extra privileges, and then you're good on the security side. So that my friends, is the biggest, number one gotcha for upgrades is messing up your security. And you got a preview of the slide already. Let's show it to you again. Thank you very much for attending. I am going to turn this over to back to Brooke. Brooke, actually, can you take that away? I can't see my control panel here. I don't know where that went. Hey there. This thing on? All right.
Okay, sorry. Yep. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, Bill. That was great. All right, really quick, before we get into our question and answer session, all right, I just want to cover a few follow-up items, and then we'll move into our question and answer section of our webcast. Our webcast today is part of GSI's free ongoing educational webcast series on JD Edwards, and our current webcasts are listed on the screen. And don't forget that we will be at Collaborate 2019 next week, so make sure you come see us at booth 445. And for all of our weekly, we provide extensive free educational resources with our weekly educational webcasts, our monthly newsletter, and our online resource center. And we also provide online and virtual workshops. And if you'd like to sign up for our weekly email reminders for upcoming webcasts, our monthly newsletter, or to create
Hey, Brooke, I lost you. Lost your audio.
oops, sorry, I lost you guys for a second. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Okay, so if you'd like to sign up for our weekly email reminders, our upcoming webcast, or our monthly newsletter, or to create an account to access our resource center, go to getgsi.com and go to platforms on the main menu, and you can select the platform that you'd like to sign up for. All right. Well, it looks like I have a question here, but just before we start answering that, I would like to remind everyone that if you would still like to submit a question, you can do so through the question panel in the GoToWebinar console window on the right side of your screen. And if you minimized your console earlier, please click the left-facing arrow to redisplay the question panel. All right, Bill, it looks like we have a couple questions here. And our first question is from Robin. And she said, what is the best browser to use for 9.2?
You know, that's going to get a lot of answers depending on who you talk to. I have clients still using Internet Explorer, which is surprising, but most people find Firefox, I think, to be the most pleasant experience. But if you're still running Internet Explorer, you can do that. It actually reminds me of another upgrade gotcha. There is a setting in 9.2 Server Manager related to, it's on the web server, and I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but it has something to do with how things are displayed on Internet Explorer. So if you're using multiple browsers after your upgrade and Internet Explorer is the only one that's slow, it's actually a known issue, and it has to do with a specific setting inside the server manager. But as far as what's the best browser, that's a matter of opinion. Firefox is what I hear the most of.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I've got one more question here from Matthew, and he said, are many clients moving from iSeries to SQL Server or Oracle?
Yes, they are, and for many reasons, and not just because Oracle is Oracle, but there's other things you can't do in iSeries that are a big deal to companies, like transparent data encryption, and you're talking about encrypting things, data in flight, data at rest, and stuff like that. iSeries, you have to use third-party stuff, and some of the iSeries skills are tough to find, so we're getting a lot of clients coming to us so that they can get off of these legacy I say legacy. I mean, they're still making the systems, but there are a lot of people moving to SQL Server and Oracle because that's just where everything is being developed, especially for third-party applications as well.
Okay, great. And I've got one last question here, and the question is, what was that table on to check on 9.2 for data source security?
Okay, so there's an application. It's P986117, and the table is the same, F986117. It's in the system database. So yeah, just check that out. Go into P986117, click find. You see nothing, then come talk to me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Oh, and they said, TW said thanks. All right, so as a follow-up from today's webcast, we ask that you complete a short 1-minute survey when you exit, and you will be receiving an email with a link to our resource center on our website, where you can access the recording from today's webcast, as well as a copy of the presentation. And after today's webcast, we will do the drawing for the $25 Amazon gift card, and anyone that attended the entire webcast will be eligible, and we will notify the winner. Well, thank you again so much, Bill, for your presentation today, and everybody for your questions and for joining us. And we hope that you have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.